And this is kind of a cool shot. We'll see if we use that. Not sure yet. This is okay, but honestly, it's not gonna really fit into the style of video that I want this to be. So that's something else that, you want to keep in mind is that as the filmer or the editor, you're gonna have a certain attachment to your own footage more than anyone else. Let's say I remember this moment. I was like, oh, yeah, my friend Ava, my friend Asa, we were at the top of that mountain and it was so nice. And I want to remember that. No one else has that memory or that attachment to the footage. So if it's not adding and if it's distracting potentially to your overall edit, you're going to want to take that out because you want to have a neutral opinion as much as possible on what is being seen. Very clearly, this is an interesting shot to anyone who has not seen this, right? This is only interesting to me because I was there and it reminds me of my friends, but we're not making this as a friend memory type of edit. So I'm going to take out that kind of shot. And that's the kind of mindset I want you to have when you're pulling together, trying to decide what should I use, what should I not use. I'm not a huge fan of this shot, to be honest. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out. And it's a good idea to kind of keep in mind what kind of length you want your video to be and how much footage you're working with. So if I zoom all the way out here, and by the way, the little, oh man, what's this called? Slant key for Premiere shows you the whole timeline if you tap it. It's below the delete key and above the return key. I don't know, backslash, I think is what it's called. If you tap it, you see the full timeline. If you tap it again, it zooms back in. So I want to see the whole timeline, and we can see I have 5 minutes of footage that I want to fit into 1 minute of this edit. So I know that stuff that I'm iffy about, that I don't think I'm going to use, I'm just going to go ahead and take it out completely. Let's move on here to the next clip. Let it play through. Okay, perfect. So this is kind of a cool shot. And as you can see, it has what we were talking about with a beginning point of interest and an ending point of interest. Every shot that you have has a beginning and an end. So if we hit play, okay, it starts right about there. You see, it's like a pretty ocean, or it's actually a lake, and there's some movement, which is kind of nice, but it doesn't really get going until around here. So I'm gonna keep a little bit of, I like this in the bottom right. So I'm gonna cut that and start it there. And then I'm gonna end it there. Okay. And you don't want to get too into the in and out point quite just yet, because we're doing a first kind of initial pass. But then you can start to split frames once you get into more of the refining process. But what we simply did there was trimmed out the intro that didn't need to be there. There was not much going on. And then right about, yep, there, we cut the end of the clip. So now it looks like we are back in the crystal underground place. So I'm going to scrub through here and see. That's kind of interesting there at the beginning. That's okay. I'm not too excited about that. Okay. So I do some kind of camera movement there to the ceiling, but honestly, like this one doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But just in case, I do like seeing this cool, all the reflections here in the stone. I think that's pretty unique. You don't get to see that much. So what I'm going to do is play it and start it when we don't really need to see any of this. It gets interesting right about there. So as you're going through your footage, keep this in mind of starting with the point of interest. You don't want to give your viewer anything to not look at because then it's like, well, why am I seeing this footage? Okay, and I'm going to end it about there. And I'm going to edit the rest of that out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to loosely organize my clips together as I'm doing this initial pass. So I'm going to highlight this second cave clip, okay? And I'm going to drag it over to the other cave clip. But what happens when I do that is that it deletes what was underneath it. Okay. The way to get around that is to, when you drag, hold command when you want to drop it. And this is going to push everything else behind where you're dropping it off back. So rather than overriding and deleting what's below it, you're simply doing the opposite thing of a ripple delete, where you're creating space and pushing everything back. So now we have this cave clip, boom, and we have this next cave clip. Now, because I'm loosely categorizing these clips together, another kind of little hack is to label or color code your clips. So the way I'm going to do that is by highlighting the clips I want to change the color of or put together. And I'm going to right click, go to label, and then I'm going to be able to choose from any of these colors. That's going to really make it obvious what clips are from the same scene, the same time of day, the same location, all different types of ways to label and organize your footage. But this is a really cool way, and that you'll see once we have our whole timeline cut together. Oof, it is such a good way, especially if you're a visual person, to keep these clips organized. And so I want you to continue with me going through and pulling selects on the rest of your video footage. Okay, so I have this clip here where I'm kind of walking, pan and tilt up to the sun. And I'm not super into that shot, so I'm going to go ahead and delete. I'm going to ripple delete here as well to to get rid of the extra space here. That's kind of a cool shot. So I'm going to keep this one. And I'm going to cut it right about there because we don't need to really see this whole stone floor. But I'm going to cut here. Okay. And then I'm going to cut there. Actually, so this is a good example of other reasons to cut as an editor. So we have our shot here. Everything looks great. And right there. So if I go back, you can see that the camera, yeah, you see that? The camera was trying to pull focus on my phone. So we don't want that. We don't need that. So that's a perfect, obvious reason, a less subtle reason, a very direct reason to cut. So right before that happens, I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And by the way, in Premiere, this little squiggly line, I don't know what it's called. I'm going to put it up on screen right now. Wherever your cursor is hovering on screen, if your cursor is over here on the viewer window, if I hit the tab, it's gonna, or squiggly line, whatever it's called, it's gonna expand. If it's here, it's gonna expand. Okay, same thing for there. So when you just want to see your program window, which is like what your final edit looks like, it's a perfect way to use it. So we're on to our next shot here, and this is great. I'm going to cut out the beginning. I'm going to scrub forward here. Okay. So the shot can either end right here, and I can add a cut right there, or it can continue, and then you kind of see more of the nature. So that's a good example of two different options. The shorter shot. So this shot starts at 33 seconds and then the main one ends at 41. So that's, if I do simple math here, that's 8 seconds. That's already plenty long for one shot. So even though this next shot has some nice nature in the background, I'm not going to use that. Okay. But what I will do is that now we have these two selected and cut, trimmed down, and they're from the same location. I'm going to highlight both. I'm going to right click and I'm going to label these. Choose your favorite color. All this stuff kind of has a yellowish vibe to me, a yellowish orange vibe. So some footage feels really bright. I choose more of a yellowish tone for labeling. Some footage is like nighttime. I choose more of a bluish tone for labeling. So this is like a lake, that can be used to create that. So as you're skimming across your timeline and looking for the shots you want to use, boom, the color is key, trust me. So moving forward now, we have this waterfall here, and I believe there's three different shots of this. So let's let this play through. We have shot one. This is shot number two. And this is the third shot. Okay, cool. So there's a few different practical ways to choose what shot to use if you have three, four options, whatever it is. We have this one that's very cool, kind of POV of a person in nature. It gives it a little bit more context. When we just have waterfall or something that we're shooting, sometimes it's hard to feel scale. Sometimes it's hard to feel how like awe-inspiring a location can be with what we're shooting without some type of reference, without having a person in it or something else in it that gives the brain something to be like, okay, damn, that's a really cool place. That is one reason to go with to choose your shot. Another reason is like what's going on in your shot. We have the same waterfall here at different angles and at different times of day. So here, waterfalls in the distance. It's not super impactful. We see the stream. I know this is kind of like funny to be talking about waterfalls and streams, but it goes across all editing decisions and choices, regardless of the footage you're using. So waterfalls in the background, it's kind of cool. And waterfalls a little bit more zoomed in here. So we have more of a close-up shot. We have a wide shot. And then we have kind of this POV shot, right? We also see that, as getting back to what I was originally saying, different times of day, different lighting, and different shot types. Now, this time of day with this lighting obviously stands out so much more. The golden stuff that's going on, like where I was when I was shooting this, is so much more interesting, impactful, tells more of a story, and gives more information to the viewer than these other two shots. So, boom, all those different questions you're asking yourself are going to be pointing you towards which shot to go with when you're sitting here with all this raw footage, right? So, let's delete one of these. Okay, I'm definitely not going to use the second one. I really like this one. I'm sure this is going to be the go-to. I'm going to move this in front of the other one, and I'm going to color code these. Let's just say teal. Okay, now we have this empty space that I'm going to remove by doing a ripple delete. We have a new location. So I would say that we can kind of trim off some of the excess stuff here, kind of step in, which is cool. Okay, boom. And this is another scenario when you can ask yourself, is the whole clip really needed? This clip is starting at 54 seconds and ending at 106. Math. That's 12 seconds. Okay, we're probably not going to use 12 seconds of this clip. So here's another opportunity with the footage that you're editing to have a long form. Okay, I might use that whole thing, or just simply trim out where the shot is likely to end. To me, we're tilting up, seeing the water, seeing the view, and we can cut there versus starting kind of a brand new shot where now you're looking at a different scenery, even though it's the same shot. You're starting a second shot, which we don't need. This is a cool slow motion shot. I don't feel like that's going to fit in the edit that we're doing here. That's something to keep in mind when you're doing your edit. Is it a bunch of normal real time footage that's not slow motion, and then all of a sudden we have this footage that's shot at 240 frames a second when the rest of our footage is shot at 30 frames a second? If you do something once randomly in an edit, then it's just random out of the blue. If you do something twice, then there's like a theme going on that makes it very likely to happen a third time. So that's something to think about, is that things generally do better in pairs or triplets. If you're going to do some type of stylistic choice or slow motion footage, don't have one slow motion clip in your footage. It'll be like a random blip. Okay. If you're going to do that, have two, three slow motion shots, or the whole thing is um, slow motion. So this is a really cool shot, but the audio is not going to be usable. So that's something that we're going to get into here in a minute. And we kind of have our last shot here, which is all these little yogis here meditating in front of the waterfall, which is kind of cool. So if I scrub through here, there's really no change in this clip. So even though this clip is about 30 seconds, because we're sitting still and there's no information that's changing in the actual footage, what's being shown on screen, doesn't matter too much where we create our in and out point. But I will kind of look and see if there's anything cool. The waterfall kind of does a cool splash here of kind of mist. So I'm going to create the in point there. Actually, yeah, it happens there. There starts to be some of that mist that comes in. So let's go ahead and make this blue, and let's put this with the waterfalls. Well, and to recap, what we've done is we've captured all of our footage, we've organized it on our computer, laptop, we've created a backup to keep everything safe, keep 2 copies of things, and we've pulled our selects, organized everything, and labeled our clips in our timeline. This is the step where now we want to create a backup sequence of all the work we just did. And there's a reason that we're going to be doing this. And that reason is when we're going in this edit and we start moving things around and we start, trimming things down and deleting clips we think we're not going to use, sometimes we don't make the right decision, which we think is the right decision at the time. But then later on, we're like, oh, where's that one shot? I know who's in there, and it's gone. So over the years, I've really learned that creating a backup of your selects is going to save you a lot of time down the road. So this is kind of a little extra pro tip here. We're going to click our main sequence in our project window, and we're going to hit Command C, or we can go and right click it and hit copy, and then we're going to paste, which is Command V, or right click and hit paste. So now I have this backup sequence of the selects we pulled. What I'm now going to do is label it what it is, which is main sequence backup. Okay. And drag it and put it in the sequences folder. So now I can always come back to this backup if needed. So, how has your edit been going so far? Good? Okay, perfect. So now we've made it to our next step. Now that we've pulled our selects successfully, we're going to be moving to creating our rough edit. Now, in this phase, this is the stage where we're going to put shots roughly where they're supposed to be. And we're not going to focus too much right now on fine tuning, on things like coloring, on things like exposure matching, or getting any of the real nitty gritty right yet. We're just really going to build a basic foundation. Okay, we're going to build the skeleton with a low frequency of cutting so that the main concept of the overall video can be seen. So if we were editing to a soundtrack, if we were editing to a storyline, we want to try and get all the spots in our timeline, hopefully the correct order, and fill any blank screens. So we want to line things up. For example, like I mentioned, a voiceover. We're not going to be doing a voiceover for this one just yet, but we're going to place our B-roll on top. This specific example doesn't really have any A-roll. We'll get more into that. And we want to get our right shot ordering together. And next, because you know I love doing these backups, man, I've learned time and time again over the years doing these little extra copy, duplicate, paste, put it in the folder, nothing to worry about. You're good. We're going to do another backup of our rough edit sequence once that's done. Because, of course, it's always a good idea to duplicate your sequence before going in and making big changes. And once the rough edit is done, that is the perfect time to step away from the project and take a little break and come back with fresh eyes. It's also an optional time where you can get client feedback, team feedback, friends and family feedback on the edit just to get another perspective of how the basic rough edit is looking before going into fine tuning. There's a how do I say it? There's a phase of editing down the road on the more refining side when you start really spending minutes, hours, days sometime on 10-second sequences. In this rough edit phase, before we get to that, we want to make sure the whole thing cohesively is making sense and is telling the story that we want to be told before getting to that phase. So that's why after we finish this next section, it's a good time to take a break, come back with fresh eyes, and look at it with a brand new perspective. Because once you're sitting in front of the laptop for a while and you've been looking at the same frames, you start to go blind in certain ways and you start to go deaf in certain ways. So as we go deeper into that, you'll start to see. But we're not quite there yet. So in this next step, we're going to create and assemble our rough edit. And so, depending on the type of travel video you've been editing during this whole portion, is really going to dictate what your opening shot is going to be. And something I want to mention is the same way that every single shot has a beginning and end. Every single video that you create has a beginning and end. I know this sounds obvious, but the reason I'm saying is because we just went through on how the beginning cut and the ending cut are so important because you're showing the person where is important, what is important to start looking at, and then what is important to end looking at or end hearing. It can be an audio thing, a dialogue thing, it can be a visual thing. Our whole video is like a zoomed out view of what happens in one edit. I don't want to get too abstract here, but we want to start with a shot that really like sets things into gear, sets things in motion. The opening shot of your video, regardless of if it's a music video, commercial, comedy, documentary, YouTube video, Instagram video, TikTok video, it doesn't matter. The opening frame, the opening shot dictates the tone and the vibe and the feeling that the viewer is going to have for the rest of the video. The ending shot is kind of the conclusion. It's what they walk away with. So something a little bit deeper to really ponder, think about that. But let's get more back into the practical side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scrub through and I'm going to find the shot that really grabs me because if it grabs me, ooh, yeah, okay. If it's grabbing me and my attention, it's a good sign that hopefully you can grab someone else's attention and get them interested in your video because that's the whole point, right? So this is definitely a contender. I like this. I think it's a unique type of shot. I mean, the scenery is like just ridiculous. We don't want to get too much down into like too low here, so maybe we'll start the shot, let's say there, so that we get the vibe, the kind of point of view feeling. That's an example of continuing to refine. When we did this first pass, like, okay, in and out, in and out, in and out. Now on the second time when I'm looking at that shot, it was starting with a little bit too much leg, a little bit too much leg action going on. So what I'm going to do is because this one catches my eye the most, I'm going to slide this over to the very beginning of our edit. That way we open up on the shot and it really sets the tone and the feeling for what the rest of the video is going to look like. And if it's obvious the clip is too loud, we can bring that down a little bit by clicking and holding that white bar. But I don't want you to worry too much about getting the audio levels perfect because that's one of the final stages of creating the edit.